Hi, I'm Tom with Kuat Racks. I'm here to show you how to put together your Sherpa properly. Started here with it in the box. Here in a minute we're going to open it up, go through the contents, show you everything that comes with your Sherpa, and then we'll start with the assembly. So let's go ahead and open up the box and get started. Alright, well, we've got the box open, so I'm going to go through the contents and show you what comes with your rack so you can kind of itemize your parts and get everything laid out there at home. So over here to my left, you have your front wheel tray. You'll have two of those in the box, as well as your rear wheel tray with your rear tire strap on it. So that's all set up there. The next part down from that is going to be the lower end for the Sherpa, or the stinger. We're going to add that to the main body here in just a little bit. Your 20 to 24 inch wheel adapter that comes with the rack, so you're able to use this rack for a smaller bike. As you go over, you get to the hardware. You notice there's a kind of a mix of washers as well as bolts and a couple screws, and the necessary tools to apply those things to your rack. So the rack comes with everything that you need to build it with. Of course, your locking hitch pin. The Sherpa comes with a 3/8 locking hitch pin. It's a custom pin designed for this rack, so it's made to fit this rack as well as your receiver. Your locking cable, or your cable for security for your bikes. 2 ratchet arms. The ratchet arms go over the front wheel next to the front fork on your bike to hold your bike down. And then, of course, the main body of the rack. So everything's laid out, got it set. Those are the contents that you're going to have in your box for your Sherpa rack. Now let's go ahead and put this thing together. Okay, now we're going to start with the assembly of the rack. Gone through the contents, you know what you're supposed to have. Now we're going to put this thing together. We're going to follow the instructions pretty close, so that way if you have those handy, you can follow along with those and kind of make sense of the parts that we're talking about. Or you're watching this video because you don't have the instructions, so just follow along with me. So the first step in the instructions is to install the stinger portion, or the lower end of the rack, to the main body. So we'll start with that. We're going to use carriage bolts, a couple washers, and then another hex bolt for the top. So let's go ahead and put this thing on. Okay, so I have the main body of the rack laying upside down on the table. That's going to make it pretty easy for me to install this lower end. So you start by sliding the lower end into that bottom section on the rack. Now you'll notice as it comes out of the rack, it actually curves up and goes into that T-handle. So that's the way it's supposed to work. Now, you start by taking the 2 carriage bolts that come with the rack and slide those in through the holes. Now there's a square portion on the head of that carriage bolt that matches the square hole on one side of the rack. So you want to match those up. That'll hold the rack hold those carriage bolts into place once you go to tighten them down. So slide both of those in. And then your washers are going to go on the other side. So there are washers that go with those carriage bolts, and then the 2 lock nuts on the outside. Now, before you tighten both of these down, you want to do one more step first. The other portion is there's a hex bolt, a lock washer, and then just a standard washer that'll go through that hole in the top. You want to add this before you tighten down your carriage bolts. That way everything will draw up nice and tight the way it's supposed to go. So you're going to apply those onto your bolt, into the hole, and then start to tighten those down. Now, of course, you're going to use the tools that come with your rack. So you've got your Allen. Let's go ahead and tighten that thing down. Oh, yeah, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Okay. And then go ahead and take your wrench and tighten down your carriage bolts. So the next step in your instructions is to add the front wheel tray to your rack. There's 2 of them, and the hardware necessary for this will be these washers and then small screws. Now this is the only step in the process that actually requires you to use a tool that doesn't come with the rack. So you will need to have a Phillips head screwdriver with you. So to start this, the front wheel tray has a groove on the back side. That's going to match up with the groove here on the rack. So to put this in, you line up that groove, go ahead and kind of slide it in a little bit. Now the front side, you pinch it together and allow it to slide it down inside the rack. Once it's down in there, you want to make sure that it seats itself all the way in. That means those two ends kind of pop through the holes on the side of the body of the rack. Take your screw and apply the washer to it, and your Phillips head screwdriver, and those pieces go on the outside to screw those in. Now as you tighten these down, or as you screw them in, you don't want to over tighten these screws. You can strip them out, so they don't need to be super tight. You just want to get them nice and snug. We'll go ahead and do the other one. After we finish this step, we'll apply these same steps to the other side for the other front wheel. Okay, now to add the rear wheel tray to the rack, you actually have to do some disassembling before you reassemble. The part comes all put together, so it has this bolt that runs all the way through, and then the ratcheting part for the strap. So your first step in this process is to go ahead and take that bolt out. That's going to allow everything to kind of come apart and put it onto the body of the rack. So, let's see here. Okay, so as you take this apart, you're going to end up with these pieces. Go ahead and set those aside for just a second. Now your rear wheel strap or tray needs to go on in a certain position. This is the back end of the rack, or the end that's going to go into the receiver in the vehicle. When you place this tray into the rack, the strap, part that raises up from the tray, needs to be closest to the vehicle, or closest to the back side of the rack. So go ahead and slide that down inside. And then go ahead and add your bolts. Now your bolt goes on the back side, so it's going to come through kind of from me to the outside, and then the ratcheting portion from your strap will go on the other end of that. And use your Allen. After we get this tightened down, of course you're going to do the same thing for the rear wheel tray on the opposite side of the rack. Okay, so the last step in your rack assembly is to add the ratchet arms to your rack. Now the rack comes with two ratchet arms. There's a certain placement for these on your rack. When you look at the two, the difference between them is one actually has a sticker on it that says Kuat, and the other one does not. They have their specific placement on the rack. The one that has the sticker on it goes on that outside tray, the one that's furthest from the vehicle. The one without the sticker on it goes on that inside tray, the one closest to the vehicle or closest to the back of the rack. Now the way these go on as well, and there's really only one way, but the ratchet arm is going to go between the bike, when you have a bike on here, and the outside of the rack. That keeps everything close to the vehicle. So this assembly is a little not tricky, but it definitely has a couple different parts to it. So we're going to move in a little bit closer, that way you guys can get a better look at how the ratchet arm goes onto the body of the rack. Okay, so again, the ratchet arm without the sticker on the arm goes on that tray that's closest to the vehicle, or closest to the back of the rack. So to start, you take the ratchet arm and slide it into that hole on the body of the rack. Now the bolts you're going to use a carriage bolt with a spacer on this inside hole. Go ahead and get that one started. Now on the back side of the rack, you're going to use the same bolt but with a large washer, and that's going to go on the back side. Now for the hole on the other side of the arm, you're going to use one of the smaller bolts. Okay, let's go ahead and grab our Allen wrenches to tighten everything down. Okay, so our ratchet arm is installed. We're going to go ahead and add the front one. That's the one with the sticker on it. So slide that into the rack, and then we'll go ahead and follow those same instructions that we did for the back one as far as applying the bolts to it. So let's go ahead and get that started. Okay, so now your Sherpa's assembled and ready to go. It's time to go ahead and put it on the back of your car, load your bikes, and have a great time riding. Thank you.